Hey everybody, mel0n here. Welcome back to another video. Today I'm very excited to be taking a look at a mouse pad I've actually had my eye on for quite a long time. Today we're going to be taking a look at the Raven Mori V2. Now I've been keeping an eye on Raven's brands ever since they announced the Mori V1 back in, I think it was May 2023 if I'm not mistaken. And I've been wanting to try their pads since then because they looked very much up my alley and they're very control focused pads, and I finally had an opportunity to do so. So I'm very excited to finally get a chance to try out the Mori. Now before we get into it, I did want to say a huge thank you to Raven for reaching out and sending over the Mori V2 for review. I greatly appreciate it. As always, with everything I cover here on the channel, you'll get the truth about everything. I won't be biased in my review regardless of a free or discounted unit, and this video will be fully subtitled and timestamps will be available down in the description. Now, we'll have a much more in-depth review of the Mori V2 coming in a couple weeks after this video goes live, so get subscribed so you don't miss my full review coming in a little bit. All right, let's go ahead and get right into it and see what the Mori V2 is all about. Alrighty, now the Mori V2 is Raven's second mouse pad. The Mori V1 launched in 2023, was discontinued due to some manufacturing defects, so that pad has now been replaced by the Mori V2, and this one fixes some of the issues that were on the Mori V1. Now, a couple highlights about the Mori V2. It is 490 by 420 millimeters. It is a control focus pad with a soft surface. It is 4.3 millimeters thick, where the Mori V1 was only 4 millimeters thick. The surface of the pad is an uncoated 100% polyester cloth that is optimized for a consistent X and Y axis performance. The base has a custom pour-on base, which is the extra soft version of that, and it retails for 69 Canadian dollars. Now, the surface weaving on the Mori V2 is what particularly piques my interest about this pad. For those of you who've been watching the channel for a long time know I'm very particular about mouse pads that don't have consistent X and Y axis performance. It really irks me, and this pad having a weaving that supposedly is supposed to have equal performance on both the X and Y axis is something that's very interesting, so we'll have to see how that actually holds up over testing and see if this is actually true or not. Alright, well that's all for what Raven says about the Mori V2. Let's go ahead and see how this pad actually feels. Alright, now in terms of packaging and shipping and that kind of stuff, the Mori V2 comes flat packed, which is wonderful to see. Again, it is a pour-on base pad, so that's kind of given it's going to be flat packed, but regardless, nice to see it here. Now this one does come shipped in a large cardboard box. It's not the thickest cardboard box I've ever seen, but it was covered in do not bend stickers. So thankfully no postal worker decided to use my package to show off their karate skills. My pad did arrive in one piece, which is lovely to see. Now I did want to make a quick note here. My Mori is using the V1 packaging. There is new packaging coming for the Mori V2 that just didn't have any at the time of my getting my unit. So if you do order a Mori V2, it's going to come with a different packaging most likely. I just have the old packaging for my unit here. Now one really cool thing that Raven did with the Mori V2 here is that they actually have a plastic baggie around the actual pad inside the cardboard box, which I actually really like. This not only adds an extra layer of protection against the pad, but it also helps with moisture, because if for whatever reason water gets into the box or whatever reason, it helps kind of save the pad from that as well, which is a really nice attention to detail to see here on the Mori V2. But now that the pad's out of the box, let's go ahead and talk about how this pad actually feels. All right, now off of first impressions, the first thing right away that kind of blares at you is the color of this pad. This deep forest green is absolutely gorgeous. The coloring on the camera does not do it justice. This pad is beautiful to look at. Raven Mousepad said that the Mori is inspired by the forests of Japan, and you can definitely see that here because the Mori looks absolutely gorgeous. Now I will say the Mori is definitely a very thick pad. It's coming in at 4.3 millimeters. It's definitely a bit of an adjustment getting used to such a thick pad like this. The pad is also very soft, even more so than the Infinity Mice pads, which is very interesting to see. And one really odd thing about this pad is actually very stretchy. You can stretch it quite far on the X and Y axis, which is something I really haven't seen on any other mouse pad before. It has a lot of elasticity, which is very interesting. The edge stitching is surprisingly thin, but it is a lot taller than a lot of the other edge stitching I've seen on other pads due to the pad's thickness, but it does feel pretty solid overall. Now the surface material does feel soft, but the weaving makes it feel kind of grainy when you run your hand across it. I'm very interested to see how the surfacing affects moisture and how it actually performs in terms of X and Y performance. We'll talk about that in the full review. And the pour-on base is also surprisingly good. Generally speaking, I'm not the biggest fan of pour-on bases. I just generally think they're kind of bad, but this implementation is actually quite good. It has a lot of natural stickiness and just kind of adhere itself to my desk without any water or any pressure, which is actually really good to see. So I'm interested to see how the Mori's pour-on base here performs over time. Now, one thing that is very nice to see here is that the Mori does not have any smell to it at all. Despite it being a green pad, it doesn't have any smell, which is really nice to see. I've had quite a few pads as of late that are very smelly, and having a mouse pad that I can just take out of the box and use immediately with no smell is amazing to see. Alrighty, now in terms of build quality and QC, the pad feels extremely solid overall. No issues with the base or surface stitching. Everything seems pretty consistent off of first impressions. The only thing I did notice is that on the side of the pad at the top left here, there is a bit of a thread sticking out of the edge stitching here. I think this is a thread that wasn't pulled through during manufacturing for whatever reason. It's not frayed and it's not loose, like I can't pull it out. It is put into something. I think it's just a thread that just didn't get pulled for whatever reason. So aside from that little minor thing there, the pad is pretty much perfect. For the full review, I'll keep a close eye on this section of the pad and see if any of the edge stitching frays or anything like that. But from right now, it just looks like it's a piece of threading that didn't get pulled through all the way. Pretty minimal. functional, but the actual parts of the pad that matter in terms of performance and consistency are all completely fine, no issues at all. All right, now as I always do when I do an unboxing video, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go boot up Kovacs, do a couple runs of Kovacs intro snare, and see how this pad feels for first impressions. Alrighty, so in terms of how this pad feels in game, just based off of a couple runs on Kovacs intro snare, it actually feels quite solid. I tested this with my Zowie U2 with the X-Ray pad Donut Obsidian skates on the bottom, and this must actually feel quite solid. Really no complaints about it. It is definitely a very controlled surface, so there is a lot of feedback from the surface there. It did great stopping power. Does feel consistent though for movements on the X and Y axis, which is nice to see. The high degree of softness on the pad does also give it a very high degree of control variability, as we've seen on other pads as well, which is very interesting. I'll see just how far the range of that is for the full review. I'll have to try it with dot skates as well and see if dot skate skirts going to sink into the surface. But overall, this pad actually does feel very, very good. The thickness is definitely something that's going to take a little time for me to get used to, because I do find that the bottom of my arm is rubbing against the edge of the Mori just because it's so tall. I maybe have to put like a towel on the bottom of my arm or something just to kind of account for the tallness of the pad. I'll also have to test arm sleeves and a bunch of other things as well for the full review. But so far, based off first impressions, this pad actually does feel quite solid overall. No real complaints. Alrighty, well that is pretty much everything for my unboxing and first impressions of the Raven Mousepad Mori V2. Overall, I'm actually really impressed. This pad feels really, really good. I really do like the feeling of this pad. I think the biggest thing right now I'm trying to get used to is the thickness of the pad, because it is very thick. But aside from that, I really do like the feeling of this pad, and I'm really, really excited to try this pad out over testing, because I've heard some really good things about the Mori, so I'm hoping it lives up to the hype. But I will have a full, much more in-depth review of the Mori V2 coming in a month or so after this video goes live, so be sure to get subscribed so you don't miss my full review coming in a couple weeks. Thank you very much again to Raven Mousepads, who was kind enough to send out the Mori V2 for me to review. I greatly appreciate it, and I'm really, really excited to test this thing out. All right, well, I'm going to go ahead and jump right into the game. This mousepad feels really, really, really solid, and I really want to try this pad out and do some performance testing on this one. So I will catch you guys on my full review of the Mori V2 coming in a couple weeks. Until then, I'll catch you later. Peace.